Well, hello everybody, this is Mr. Moppin coming at you. This is another APUSH video for topic 4.3. Last time we were talking about some of the important domestic policies of Thomas Jefferson, really specifically the Louisiana Purchase. But today we're going to be taking a look at two other critical figures in the first decade of the 19th century. And one of these individuals is going to be this character right here. This is, of course, Aaron Burr. Now, the last time we talked about Aaron Burr had seemingly gone from what was kind of assumed to be the vice presidential candidate for the Democrat-Republicans in 1800 to almost stealing the election of 1800 to become president in his own right. Well, after that kind of a wild event plays out, Burr does end up becoming the vice president of the United States. But of course, has burned Jefferson pretty much as a friend or political ally moving forward. And, you know, one of the things about Burr, he never seems to totally learn his lesson. He is, just kind of hopelessly ambitious in terms of what he wants to do. He's not afraid to flip parties. He's not afraid to risk criminal charges. He's kind of willing to do just about anything. He starts out as a Federalist, switches from the Federalists to the Democratic Republicans. Once he gets in trouble with Jefferson after the election of 1800, he starts to kind of, play footsies with the Federalists again. In fact, there was a period there in the early 1800s where he was trying to work with Federalists in New England to try to become encourage secession from the Union in that part of the country. Once again, with the idea of maybe becoming a president of a new republic, perhaps. But probably the thing still to this day that Burr is most famous or really infamous for is his duel with Alexander Hamilton. Now, this duel with Hamilton doesn't come out of nowhere. Remember, Hamilton and Burr both trace their political histories to New York State. Now, Hamilton has been, a Federalist pretty much from the get-go. Burr has been someone, as I've said a moment ago, has been willing to kind of float between parties, really pretty much looking out for himself, putting himself first. And over time, this kind of wears away at what had been a working relationship with Burr to now between Hamilton and Burr, a sense that Hamilton really does not respect Burr, and Burr did not really appreciate it in 1800 when Hamilton encouraged folks in the House of Representatives to vote for Jefferson in the election of 1800. And it only goes downhill from there. Basically, there is an attempt by Burr to try to run for future office in New York. Doesn't work out. He blames Hamilton for using his influence once again to kind of thwart his political goals. A letter writing campaign between these two men starts to, kind of increase the temperature in terms of the tension between these two guys. And once we start getting into the name calling, it almost kind of looks like an early 19th century version of a rap battle. But note, once one's honor has been questioned, which Burr believes Hamilton has done by calling him a scoundrel, Burr believes that the only way that he can defend his honor moving forward is to challenge Alexander Hamilton to a duel. And even though Hamilton had already had his son die in a duel not too long previously, Hamilton feels that he has no other option as a gentleman but to accept the challenge from Burr. Now, note, normally when we think of duels, we tend to think of, two guys showing up at a location with the specific purpose of each trying to kill the other, and that only one will walk away alive. That's not really how dueling works. Dueling is designed to test one's honor. It is not necessarily designed to try to murder somebody. It just is an idea of, are you willing to put your life on the line to defend your honor? In many cases, it was not uncommon for two folks involved in the duel to show up at the duel, both be given their pistols, they walk their paces, stand and face each other, and then just point their pistols in the air and fire them in the air as a way of kind of saying, okay, I've come to defend my honor. You've come to defend your honor. We'll both walk away as honorable gentlemen and leave it at that. So that was that was not uncommon to see that happen. So just because a duel's happening doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's going to die, but people do die in duels, and that's why, for example, New York had outlawed the practice, and so that explains why Hamilton and Burr are going to have to travel across the Hudson River to New Jersey, where it was still legal to duel. Now, the way this plays out is still open to interpretation, depending on who you want to believe. But most people, prefer to believe Hamilton, especially, in light of the recent Hamilton surge in popularity from the musical. But there is a general consensus, very, very weak, that this is kind of probably how this played out. So the two men show up in Weehawken, New Jersey. They both have brought their seconds, meaning witnesses to stand on their behalf. They've been given their pistols. They, are back to back, and then they walk their paces. They turn. Now, here's what happens. We know that Hamilton fires first. Burr will claim that Hamilton was trying to aim at him and happened to miss, hitting a branch above Burr's head. Others that are, of Hamilton's camp will argue that no, Hamilton did not intend to hit Burr. He intentionally aimed high to intentionally miss Burr as a way of, not turning this duel into, a bloodbath. Regardless of who you want to believe in this situation, we know Burr responds, and the response by Burr is going to be deadly. As you can see in this depiction right here, Burr will hit Hamilton. Now, it doesn't hit him in the head, although it kind of looks like in this depiction that he does. He actually hits him in the midsection. The bullet, when it enters his body, severs his spinal cord, and he's immediately paralyzed. And he is then carried back across the Hudson River, and not too long after that, dies from his injury. Now, when this plays out with the death of Hamilton, we look at many of Hamilton's final letters that then eventually start to become published in newspapers, and it kind of sends a message that Hamilton was not really asking for this duel. He didn't really want the duel. He felt kind of pressured to be in it. Didn't seem like somebody that was hell-bent on trying to murder somebody. And so, the newspapers are going to have quite an impact on public perception of this event, and Burr is certainly going to be the one that is going to be viewed negatively as a result. Basically, Burr becomes persona non grata in New York for having killed basically the most famous man from New York out of pure bloodlust / ambition. But this still, though, even though this kind of makes Hamilton a little bit of a martyr, it kind of raises his public profile. Because remember, Hamilton certainly was not above criticism in his life, for sure. But, his early death kind of erases some of those memories. But Burr, he's still, despite what has happened here, despite being seen as, a scoundrel for trying to steal the election of 1800, seen as murderous in the death of Hamilton, he's still not done. Just a couple of years later, we see that Burr had made his way out into the Western Territories, out into kind of where the Louisiana Purchase was, kind of out in modern-day Arkansas, Louisiana, Missouri, that kind of area. And he was working with a general out there by the name of Wilkinson on a plan to potentially steal territory from the United States and basically turn it into a personal kingdom of his, and work with the Spanish to make this happen. This is a problem, because if you are viewed as somebody that is aiding in war against the United States, that's called treason, and Burr actually will face a treason trial for this for this incident. Now, he is acquitted in the trial. He never goes to prison for it. But his name is mud pretty much the rest of his life. He goes from being somebody that was in the inner circle of the Founding Fathers to somebody that, most folks would just simply walk over in the street now if they saw him. So the decline and fall of Aaron Burr is nothing short of dramatic. However, there's another man of this time period that will see his influence grow rather than recede during this time period, and it's going to be this man right here. This is Chief Justice John Marshall of the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, Marshall is not going to be the first justice on the court, the first Chief Justice of the court. That's John Jay. But he will be the first one to truly make the court what it is today. He'll serve on the bench for over 3 decades and really, truly be the justice that makes the court what we kind of understand it to be today. And more importantly, kind of set a tone in terms of how the Constitution will be interpreted moving forward. And as the nickname suggests, even though we are entering into a long sustained period of Democrat-Republican control of Congress and the White House, and really the beginning of the end of the Federalist Party in total, Chief Justice Marshall is going to live on will promote the Federalist legacy well into the Jackson presidency, earning him the moniker as the last Federalist. And so what does that mean? Well, think about it. If the Federalists were going back to their origins, people that believed in a broad, powerful central government, well, that's what's going to happen with Chief Justice Marshall leading the court during this critical stage. We're going to see many situations where Justice Marshall will lead the court to, kind of focus on the idea of, expanding federal control, and at the same time limiting state powers and states' rights. For example, you have the case of McCulloch versus Maryland, where we see the state of Maryland attempt to tax a branch of the Bank of the United States. In other words, a state government trying to tax an agent of the federal government. The court ruled that no, you can't do that. You can't have a state tax a part of the federal government because to do so would say that the states were superior to the federal government. Marshall writes that the power to tax is the power to destroy. You cannot have a state tax the federal government. In other words, you're saying the state could destroy the federal government. You can't have that. It also, in that same case, also supports the constitutionality of the Bank of the United States in and of itself. Remember, there was questions early on whether or not it was even constitutional to have a Bank of the United States. The Supreme Court under Marshall says, yes, it is constitutional. We also see the Supreme Court also focusing on a broad interpretation of the Commerce Clause, the ability of the federal government to regulate interstate commerce from the case of Gibbons v. Ogden. But the most important of these rulings is certainly going to be Marbury versus Madison, which is where we're going to be seeing the Supreme Court assert its judicial review power, meaning the ability to find actions of Congress unconstitutional. This basically focuses on a case where John Adams had appointed a man by the name of William Marbury at the last minute to fill a D.C. court vacancy, but by the time Marbury is told of what had happened, the Jefferson administration has come and taken over. Madison is now Secretary of State, and he's handling the paperwork for filing these petitions for these new federal judiciary positions. And when it comes to Marbury, who was a Federalist, and Madison is a Democrat-Republican, he basically throws it in the garbage. Marbury says, hey, hold on a second, I'm supposed to have a federal judiciary position. He asked the court to issue something called a writ of mandamus, a power of the Supreme Court given to it by Congress in 1789 to allow it to kind of force an order of something. But when it makes its way to the Supreme Court, Marshall rules that the power of the court to actually have writ of mandamus power, the ability to force the executive branch to do something, to basically force it to do its job, is a violation of separation of powers. That the court actually can't have that power, because if it did, it would be unconstitutional. So at the same time it limits itself in terms of the power of issuing a writ of mandamus, it is issuing itself a much greater power, judicial review, the ability to find federal actions, federal laws unconstitutional. Okay? So we're going to leave it there for today. Just be aware Jefferson is going to finish 2 terms. He won't run for a third, and he will endorse Madison to replace him, and Madison will win. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.